and finals taking place. We're day 2. Big matchup, historic matchup in a lot of ways between the two brands, Virtus.Pro, Navi. So let's get right into it. You know, the vetoes will come in a few minutes, but one of the big things I think we're hearing about yesterday's play, and again, we didn't see VP on the main stage, but they're changing a lot of stuff because they've been in a slump for a while, right? Yeah. So what we heard was that Pasha didn't op very much yesterday, maybe 1 or 2 rounds, and Neo took over main opping, and they're also moving guys' positions within their strats. So obviously they're trying to figure out what went south and try to fix it. Thoughts on these kind of changes?
Well, that's the problem Virtus.Pro always face. It's kind of a similar problem Nip has in some ways, which is if you're in the mindset that it has to be these players, the one thing we can never consider is a roster change, then you can never make that problem of like, okay, well, we know we need this, that we need more of an entry fragger, or our AWP's not so good now, so let's just get that in. Let's almost go and order exactly that. I think there's an AWP we can get here. Instead, it's like, it has to be these 5. We're not going to change players. Therefore, all you can do at that point is just try new things, mixing things up. Like, oh, put this guy in the CT position. Is that going to work better at the moment? Hey, you can AWP for a while. I'll just rifle, see if we can make that work. But it's more of a question mark, you know, even they don't know if it's going to work. And sometimes, unfortunately, what you find was the original scenario you had was the best. It's just that, like, players are in slumps, or maybe your style isn't that effective against the teams you're playing now. The peer group who's with you at the top is different, you know. And so the problem for VP is, it feels like it's been a while since they were that world-class team who were going to win these events. You know, it's been going downhill a bit, so they're really gambling big that these moves are going to work. Because eventually, if these moves don't work, it doesn't turn things back around again, which it has done a bunch of times in the past. It's eventually going to have to be roster move time.
Well, going even farther on that also is, you know, playing in the pro scene, you play the same spot for 2 years straight. Like, it kind of gets stale. Like, it gets kind of, you get tired of playing the same spot. I mean, we see NIP changing spots a lot. And Virtus.Pro, who has historically been good on Cash, and Bialy has always been good at A, now all of a sudden he's playing B. So I could see that it's just getting stale. They just want like that rejuvenation, you know, different spots. Neo starting to opposite of Pasha. I mean, maybe it's just, you know, starting to feel kind of robotic at that point.
Well, let's look. We got a key player matchup, and I'm pretty sure this is Taz versus Guardian as the matchup. So let's see what the stats say about that.
I certainly hope not.
And again, you also, I might have missed question. You also have basically flipped their rankings. Navi is now number 3 for you, and Virtus.Pro is now number 7.
Yeah, once upon a time, VP was always 3rd or 4th. They were all, because the thing about VP was they were never the best, but they were always the team that if they just went 1 level higher, they could win an event. They had that mode, the Virtus Plow, where they could become unstoppable, but they couldn't kick it in that top gear all the time. You know, even they didn't necessarily know when it was coming. The problem is, it's been a long time since we've seen that mode. We saw glimpses of it ESEA when they smashed Cloud9 on Overpass. Game a lot of people forget about in Cloud9's excellent otherwise run. But aside from that, they've had their issues. I mean, the last tournament they went out, and I've mentioned this already yesterday, the way they were eliminated was by King Win, huge upset in itself, but then 16-0 on their original home at Cash. They got utterly crushed on it. So that's incredibly unceremonious for one of the greatest CSGO lineups we've ever seen.
Yeah. We've talked about their slump. I'm just looking at my notes here. You think Navi's going to win this? Are they I mean, to me, they were the favorites, right?
Navi have shown so little weakness in the last 3 or 4 events. You have to look at the things they've done. When Envious was still a top team, they crushed Envious 3-1 in a big final. Even with Shox in absolute god mode, they contained him. They just won. They beat Envious at Star Series 13. They managed to, yeah, here we go. So they managed to win ESWC. They beat Cloud9 there. Beat Flipside there when they upset Nip. They managed to, what else did they do? Oh, they had semi-finals at the last tournament, Face It Stage 2 or DreamHack Valencia, whatever you want to call it. They were one of the only teams to take a map off the team that actually won the tournament, TSM. They beat TSM on one of TSM's strong maps, Mirage, I think it was. So this is a team which is like only going to be stopped at the moment by really elite level, world-class sorts of teams. It has to be, in theory, a Fnatic or a TSM level team. Now, hey, there's no Fnatic or TSM at this tournament, so if you're a team like Guardians or you're a team like Cloud9, these 2 teams are supposed to be above the others. It's a given. You should be in the final. You should be winning the event. If you don't, now we've got questions to ask. Normally, it's like if things go well, you could win. It's like no. If you don't win, what went wrong? That's the way we're going to look at these 2 teams now, and especially for Navi, because they've had this 6 streak. They've had like top 4s the last 6 events. You have to realize the thing about the old Navi was they'd have a big run, they'd have a big nice performance, so they'd play a team close. But it would be up and down. They'd come 5th to 8th at a tournament, then they'd win a tournament, then 5th to 8th to the next one, then maybe a top 4. They've had like 6 top 4s in a row. They've had finals in something like 3 or 4 of them leading up to the last event. So the level at the moment is this team never goes out in group stage. They always are a threat in the semifinals, and then usually they should win the event. So you can see kind of the path that we've got at this sort of a tournament.
And it speaks to a lot of consistency, right? And they've had the same in-game leader, Zeus, who doesn't get talked about much.
No.
You know, we just kind of, he's always there. He's been there forever, literally almost, right?
Yeah.
Talk to us about Zeus.
I mean, this is a guy where he's been actively playing in the pro scene since something ridiculous. We're talking like 2004, 2005, and wasn't an in-game leader originally. That's the thing, he was just a fragger. In fact, he was sort of just like he wasn't even like a star player, he was just sort of like a middling sort of guy, like decent aim, just sprays a bit, just adds in some frags to the mix, you know. Instead, now, later on in his career, in Na'Vi, and some of the teams before that, Kirshner, he starts taking over in-game leading roles. He's having to learn this whole role. He's never been that sort of a player. And obviously, with Na'Vi, when they were formed, the first year they were formed, they had the most successful year in the history of Counter-Strike 1.6, and he was a big part of it because he set their style. These teams from Eastern Europe, the teams from the CIS region, they were never known as tactical monsters. They were the teams who played almost an NA style, very aim-based, trying to have good AWPers, trying to have good fraggers, and then you're gonna win by just taking the aim duels. So it's not that he went totally away from that. He made like a hybrid style. He was like, we'll take our stars, and his stars were different, remember. He had people like Edward, he had people like Marklov. Now he's got totally different stars. Okay, Edward's still there, he's not a star player anymore. Now he's got Guardian, now he's got Flamey. So to have a lot of success, again, in a totally different era, half a decade later, and with totally different players, that shows that you've got something going on as an in-game leader. You understand, it's not, you weren't just the perfect leader for that team, you understand the strengths of your team, how to use them, how to cover up your weaknesses. So I've always been impressed with them. Anyone who can adapt and has longevity, you know, it's very good to win, but longevity is a quality that not many people have in this game.
Yep, gotcha. Well, the veto's starting, as you can see, nothing's been picked yet, so I'm gonna try to get your thoughts on it before we start seeing the real info.
Here's what's going to make this interesting is that these teams play all the outlier maps.
Yep.
They play Train, Overpass, Cobble. And actually, once you get past Train, I think Train's Na'Vi are more of a Na'Vi map, even though VP plays it. But Overpass and Cobble, hey, that's really hard to know who's even better there. They both like both of those maps. So actually, this is a map pool which is almost entirely wide open. There's almost nothing they don't want to go to. The only one I can think of is I don't think Na'Vi want to play Cache. But then again, Cache is the map that VP played close on here, and that they lost 16-0 to Kingwin. So the VP not want to go with Cache.
Mirage as well. I mean, both teams are
They
historically
love
good
those
at
maps.
Mirage.
Yeah.
But Virtus.Pro's not a fan of Dust 2, though, right? So you think they would get that out of the pool?
Possibly, but that's the thing. Na'Vi haven't been playing against top teams so much. The thing is, if I'm VP, just thinking myself, I would probably just take out Train. Okay. And if I'm Na'Vi, I'm probably going to take out Cache maybe, beyond that. But beyond that, like, listen, what they could even pick is very strange, because I could see a world in which suddenly Na'Vi picks Overpass, and then VP picks Cobble or something, you know. This could really be the way it goes.
This would be interesting to see a best of 3 on just the outlier maps and then in the new Train. That would be very interesting.
Because the interesting thing is, if you want to talk about Train, which at the moment is very much considered a Na'Vi map, they're very strong. The last time these two teams met was actually in the semi-final of Gfinity, I think it was Spring Masters 2, the one where in the final VP lost to Fnatic. VP won a very tight 2-map semi-final where both were like full max limit, but one of the maps was on Train actually, and that was when VP beat Na'Vi, and that's before Na'Vi's streak of all those finals. They kept them out of their first final, and so I think Na'Vi was already ready to become world-class, but VP had the answer for them then. Yep. So that's why I think it's a sexy matchup now. Forget the fact that there's a disparity in world rankings. The matchup, how they're going to play against each other, personnel, I think it's a really close matchup actually.
Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Virtus.Pro as well. Recently, I think their CT sides have been pretty lackluster. I'm not impressed at all with their CT sides. And historically, the Snacks, the Bialy are always known. You know, Snacks was considered, and probably still is considered, one of the greatest smoke kind of lurkers on CT side. You know, he'll throw like a really crazy smoke, push through it, throw his like right hand flash up in the air, flash somebody, and push through the smoke. And obviously, Bialy is like really good at anchoring the small sites. He gets 2 or 3 kills almost every time. You know, he used to do that. So I don't know what it is lately. I mean, we obviously see there's some kind of discomfort because they're changing around all their spots. But I think that if Pasha's not opting on their CT sides and Snacks and Bialy are both playing kind of, you know, different than what they used to, I can't see Virtus.Pro winning. Like, Guardian should just run them over.
Yeah, that is one of the problems here, is that historically, when you look at the matchups, like, hey, listen, we can go man for man here. Okay, you've got Guardian, cool, we've got Pasha.
Yeah.
Oh, you've got Flamey, it's really hot. We've got Bialy, mate. We've got this aggressive aimer. You can go man for man here, and it's like, oh, really good matchup. The problem is, you look at the Na'Vi players. Every star type of player is in peak form right now. Look at the VP player. Every star player is in the slump right now. Everyone. Snacks last year was one of the best players in the whole world. Every game you knew this guy was going to deliver, he was going to be in this way. Bialy was always more temperamental, but you knew he was going to have the breakout games. He'd have that one map where he just took over the whole game and he was the best player in the server. It's been a long time since Snacks has had any consistency like that. He's not as in his maximum slump that he was before, but he's never got back to that leveling. At the moment, he's not a world-class player. It's okay. Like you said, Dust 2 maybe for Virtus.Pro, they don't want to play that. Cash was the obvious one for Na'Vi, just because, hey, we don't mind any of the rest of the map pool there. And even though we're not playing Dust 2 so much, we know VP probably going to ban it. So far it makes sense. I'm thinking if you're Na'Vi here, since Train's open, I'm going to pick that. I think that's the most obvious pick here. I wouldn't be surprised if Virtus.Pro picks Mirage, by the way.
But do you pick Train knowing that Virtus.Pro gets to take CT side first, if you pick it?
The problem is Na'Vi's a good T-side team, so I think that might not bother them. I mean, the other thing is, the reason to pick Train now is because you don't know what the third map will be, obviously, so you don't want to have to hope that's the third map, because that's one of the few ones in the map pool here that you should have a little bit of an advantage over VP on. So if you pick now, you know the third map, no matter what's going to be something that's good for you. So even if VP goes, listen, I mean, it's hard to find anything left here that would be bad for Na'Vi. Yeah. Even on Inferno, they're strong at the moment. So I actually think VP is going to go for something like Mirage. I'm feeling either Mirage or Cobble for them. The thing is, like I said, VP's good on Overpass as well, so that could be, I think it's either Train or Overpass definitely for Na'Vi, and then I feel like for VP, I think it's Mirage or Cobble. So here we go, Overpass pick here.
Overpass.
Because the thing is, VP's the sort of team as well, historically as well, where they don't care if you're really, we've got it the other way around. They pick Train, which is actually quite shocking to me. That's the one I would expect them not to, but we're going to get the Mirage third game. What's great about this is, in theory, these teams are at least good on all these maps, and I know Na'Vi's good on all three. So if you want to see a full 3-map series, I think the table's set here. Now, it's up to VP to turn up. They can't just let Na'Vi blow past them, but you've got the workings here where it shouldn't be like, I win dominantly on my map, you win on yours, and let's see on the 50-50 third one. All these maps should be contended.
No, absolutely. And I think if it goes to map 3, Mirage is like both of these teams' probably best map. So I really want to see this go to a map 3. That would be like a great map 3 to see.
Yes, but that's the thing. The third map should be the closest. Like for me, it'd go in this order. Mirage, both of them can definitely win that. Overpass should be pretty close. Train, this is what's shocking to me. Because VP picked Train, I'm actually thinking Train a bit more over to Na'Vi. But like I say, historically, they always do match up so well. It's definitely going to be...
Predictions, boys. It's tough one.
The problem is, Hiko's kind of right. Like, in terms of form, you should just say 2-0 Na'Vi. It should be easy. But when I see the maps, and I think of how VP can usually... The thing with them is, even if they're in a slump, they usually rise to the level of a better opponent. So I'm going to go 2-1 Na'Vi.
Okay.
I'm going to give it 2-0 Na'Vi.
Okay.
I cannot see Virtus.Pro grinding it on Train. Like, if
no,
Na'Vi
but I think they have a chance
map,
on Overpass, so that's the thing.
Maybe. I still think Na'Vi, I give the edge to Na'Vi. Like,
okay. Even with VP getting the CT side, right? Because the rules are if you pick the map, the other team gets the side, so they're going to take CT, right? So even with that, doesn't matter to you.
Nope.
Hiko, man.
I can't agree with Thorn over here.
I like it. Let's talk about Flamey a little bit.
Okay.
Because he's a huge impact player. Also doesn't necessarily get that much love. I mean, compared to the Guardian of the world.
It's always been like kind of a naive way of looking at the scene, that when the last player to join before you become really good, people are like, he must have done it. But in this case, he kind of did. Because the thing with Na'Vi was, it was the Guardian show. Like, if Guardian does really well, they have a chance versus anyone. If Guardian's off, they would lose nearly every single time. Flamey came in, and now you've got like a second guy who can be a star player who can take over the game. And we saw this at ESWC. In the final, Guardian really had struggled on those 2 close maps against Cloud9. Flamey was like, don't worry, I've got this. He took over, big fragging. He was able to match all of the Cloud9 stars and exceed them. So when you've got 2-star legit players like that, both in very hot form, that's why Navi's very dangerous for every opponent right now.
No, yeah, another thing to mention is, I played with the Flipside guys 2 weeks ago at ESWC, so they're very close with Na'Vi, and they told me, Flamey joining this lineup, he was kind of like the inexperienced guy, really good aim, like kind of like an up-and-coming star, and what they've actually been doing with him is Starix is actually working very close with him, like during the round, and saying,
That's the coach who stands behind him,
yeah, exactly. So Flamey's, in his spot trying to anchor. Starix will be like, okay, do this, do this, do this. So to have a player like Flamey, and as well as, such an experienced player in Starix behind him, telling him exactly what to do and making sure he doesn't make the mistakes, like, that's like the dream, like having somebody like that just being kind of manipulated.
It's actually quite a unique concept as well, because I can think of many teams, NA teams, where if you could actually have that setup, it would make certain players a lot more viable. if you've got some young guy who's got really good skills, and if he's in the right positions, he'll get the kills, but he doesn't have the experience to know how to get those right positions, especially versus international competition. He's never played them. He's never been in this tough situation where this isn't working. If you had a guy who could essentially sort of micro him in the back of his head, like, hey, just move back a bit, like play this one off a bit, maybe see like if they flash it, go through it this time. Suddenly, you sort. It's like pawns on a chessboard, you know. Suddenly, you can execute a great move that maybe you yourself couldn't have seen from the position down in the battlefield, you know. So I think that's very interesting, especially because the thing is, Flamey's a guy where a lot of talent, but actually he hasn't had that much pro experience. It was only something like 7-8 months ago where he was the team that like narrowly qualified for that ESL 1 Cologne major, and people thought he was a cheat back at the time because he was just sort of like a brainless aimbot type guy, and so. The fact that he has developed into this more complete player, maybe it does speak to that. Like, maybe he didn't just suddenly figure it all out. Maybe he's got help. Maybe they've got an infrastructure that no one else has thought of. I mean, I can think of a lot of teams where if you'd have given me some legendary Khan type figure to just tell that guy like basics, like, hey, switch it up a bit, you know, you can play like this. You could have had very different results for some of the young guns in the scene, you know. Whereas, I mean, listen, you want to talk about young guns? These are the old dogs, you know, the old
exactly.
guys. But that's also what makes VP dangerous as well. Even when you have this team beaten down by results and things are going badly, they've been through so many wars. You know the amount of times I've seen Neo be in a situation where his team did really badly in the last tournament. Everyone's like, they're done after this. It has to be roster moves. And mentally, they're so strong, you know. They always come back. They always have this ridiculous inner confidence, you know. You can tell them, like, listen, you're playing it all wrong at the moment, you know. This map's not working for you. And they're like, no, I think we can still do this, you know. Like, if everything goes right. That's the thing. Because they've been through so many battles together, they always have that thing in the back of their mind, like, oh, it could still work for us, you know. I know how these guys have played in the past. Like, it's not the end. Like, it'll figure itself out. And somehow it usually does.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, you know, the matchup Guardian versus Pasha, right?
Yep.
Does that turn into Guardian versus Neo now? Or is it still
Well, that's what I want to see,
those two?
because the problem is, even if, let's say Neo is now the designated AWP, let's say he's going to try that, okay? There's no way Neo can go up with this Guardian right now. Guardian is way too good. Almost no one can go up against Guardian right now. So here's the question. If it is Neo who's going to AWP, and some of these maps are obviously AWP maps, how long do they stick with that? Because if that's not working, do you just let Neo get eaten up by Guardian every time?
Yeah.
Eventually, you're going to have to say, hey, Pash, listen, you've got to take this guy. Like, you've got to match up there. Or you're going to have to go all rifle. Now, what's interesting is VP have always been a team that could 5 rifle, because Pasha's actually known for having good rifles as well. He's not just a dedicated AWPer. So if they want to go that route, they can go that route too. So I want to know that. What is the response when Neo inevitably can't out-AWP Pasha, Guardian? Do they put Pasha back in, or do they just go 5 rifle?
And supposedly yesterday he was on fire with the AK, etc. So that part of and Neo supposedly did quite well. Obviously, different caliber of teams they played yesterday, so we shall see against the beasts that
Well,
are
the thing
Navi.
is, what's interesting is you don't often see that. Like a lot of the AWPers, it's true, they're not that strong with the rifles. But one of the reasons why Pasha is, funnily enough, it's the same reason why the other ones aren't, which is a lot of the other guys, because they're used to AWPing, they visualize the game differently. They're trying to always be at max range. They're trying to take just like the edge of a corner. They're not playing like safe angles. They're not usually like team playing off another guy for a crossfire. It's a different way of thinking of the game. So the problem is you give them the AK or the Colt in the round that they normally have the AWP, they just play the spot the same way, and they just hope it works and they get the AWP back next round. Pasha, even when he AWPs, he doesn't go max range. He's like a mid-range guy. He goes really aggressively on you. So actually, you just put a rifle in his hands. That's where you want to be with a rifle. You want to close the distance. You want to get in close, spray, get behind people. So in a way, his game is very much adaptable to going to a rifle. And like I said, in VP's era, it wasn't always just him with the AWP. He wasn't the guy every round you buy the AWP. Sometimes he would mix it up. He'd go to rifle sometimes for some games.
I think also you just touched on it, how Virtus.Pro actually can pull off the 5 rifle. And I think one of the reasons why they're able to do that is because they might not be the most tactically sound team, but they have all the smokes. They know all the smokes, how to throw them exactly. They're really, really good at timing everything. And I think that is why they're able to pull off, not having the AWPer, being able to smoke them off, molly them off, flash them off, and just get in their face and, catch them off guard.
That's the thing. Tactically, these two teams have this. They share something in a sense, which is that they both. They're not the team that's like, okay, here's what the opponent does, and here's how we're going to change everything to fit that. They don't ever do that. Both these teams are like, this is how we like to play. Now, how do we make that work? That's the question. We're going to do our plan. We're going to try and impose it on the other ones. So Virtus.Pro, they're the team where they literally will figure out, like, we're going to have to brute force this area here. Like, we're going to have to, if it doesn't work now, we're going to have to go back to it again. We're going to have to go in there. And so listen, they've got balls, you know. They'll just go into these sites. They'll go in sometimes without flashes and smokes if they don't have the money for it. Navi's the team where they have, listen, here's the thing. On one hand, they have the huge notebook. They have all the tactics. The difference is they're not all extreme tactics. Not like some crazy flash one and one's a molly. It's like the same sort of approach, but like a little twist on it. Like, they were expecting this last time, so if we throw this flash here, that one little adjustment makes that tactic work suddenly. So which style works? Can VP brute force it? Can Navi just keep mixing it up enough that they just consistently put together those patterns of rounds? It's always hard to tell because it's such a clash of styles.
I'm going to shift gears and talk about maps a little bit. Train 1.6 is one of my favorite maps.
It's a great map. The architecture.
What are you guys thinking about this new version of Train? Because obviously they've done some tweaking. They're still tweaking it. So thoughts from you as a player, and then thoughts from you, Thorin, too, on the map.
When I think back to 1.6 and I think Train and I think of Neo, I think of probably the most dominant player on Train that ever existed. Like, he had such good movement. He's like flying around the trains, like hitting headshots back and forth. Like, people couldn't op him ever. This Train and in CSGO, it's a lot different. You can't have that sick of movement. Like, you used to be able to like jump under the trains really fast and fly off the ladders onto the other train. So I don't think he's as effective in CSGO on Train specifically compared to how he was in 1.6. But again, like, CSGO in general is just a lot of a changed game, and this Train is a lot different than the 1.6 one. Like, the bomb train is in a completely different spot. The inner train, the inner bomb site has, you know, trains that didn't even exist in 1.6.
Yeah, and the upper deck and the window, the whole different flash, all that stuff. But thoughts on it? I mean, you played it a bunch. You know, what do you think of it?
I like playing CT, but probably like most teams, like CT is pretty easy to get rounds on. T side, if you run into a team that, you know, you lose pistol on T side, the other team just gets mollies and ops and auto snipers and scouts, and they push up with like rifles into the smokes. It's really hard to win early battles. Like, a lot of times what you see is teams will try to go out mid early on T side, and if they get shut down and they're not able to take mid control early, they run into a problem. And I know watching Virtus.Pro play on Train, like, Pasha ends up going Ivy most of the time with his op instead of mid, which is usually like the standard play. So we have to see how that actually works. And even if Pasha is opping, like, he might just decide to rifle and go Ivy instead.
Yeah. I'm actually not a fan of this map. It's the map I like the least in the map pool at the moment. I think every other map's got a certain charm. The big problem I see on this map at the moment, it is also why the best T-side teams are, like, at the moment, head and shoulders above everyone else, is that when you're on CT, there's a logic to it. Everyone kind of roughly knows how you play and how to play against the smokes, etc. What I don't like on T-side is it feels like the most random in the actual how the fights play out. If you go to the outer site, it's almost luck as to, is this guy the CT behind this train, or is he just behind me this round? As I'm turning to shoot this guy, is the other guy coming up from the alley in his... But basically, when you're in the outside site, it's one of the only maps where you can be shot from almost 360 degrees, and you can't stop and just walk and check every single angle. You have to just gamble that, like, hey, as I run in here, the teammate's looking at the right guy here, and the enemy doesn't step out the wrong timing. So what I don't like about that is, I feel like, listen, it makes it seem exciting because you can have all these crazy plays. How's it possibly going to go? Is Olafmeister going to kill 3 people here? Is he just going to get shut down immediately? But I think it's a lot harder to establish like a basic rhythm to the game. So just when I'm analyzing the game, it's hard to tell how well people are doing. In general, I think it becomes a battle of the CT sides. That's why, although I did put in the caveat there, that's why if you are a team like Na'Vi, if you really can dominate the terrorist side here and make things work over and over and over, like, there is room, because everyone else is going to have such a hard time. If you've got the sick killer strat that works, that you can just keep tweaking, you're going to have more success than everyone else, because everyone else to some degree is gambling and they're not even knowing what works for them, because one round it works, you think it's because of what you did, but actually the CT was just slightly off in the wrong position there, and you might think that applies to every map, but it doesn't as much. The other maps tend to play out more obviously. Like, I could pause at most like 3v3 situations and go, like, where should they go, where would you expect the CT to be? It's a lot harder to do on this map. I think there's so many hiding spaces, so many flank positions from almost every spot on that outside site.
No, yeah, and like the lack of what the Americans call heaven, you know, the
crazy. Yeah, I go crazy. Yeah, I go